and its surrounding trade routes for almost 75 years. From 1754 to 1763, Native Americans fought on both sides in what was called the French and Indian War. However, Britain won, and France gave up much North American land. New York City quickly became an important port, since it's surrounded by water. People opened shops, inns, and markets to provide services for travelers. Other people were needed to build houses for the growing population. Still others came to farm the rich soil and supply food to the city's people. Businesses grew quickly, as did the population. By 1771, about 22,000 people lived in New York City. New York City became a popular center of trade for merchants from Europe and other colonies. Settlers included the British, Dutch, Germans, and Africans. People from all religions were welcome too. However, New York colonists mostly ate and dressed like other colonists. Today, New York City continues to be a place for immigrants to make their homes. Boston. In 1630, about 800 British Puritans settled Boston in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. They followed a strict way of life guided by their religion and tried to keep people with other beliefs from settling in Boston. However, by 1720, about 12,000 people of different religions and ways of life lived there. Boston's location on the Charles River and two bays made it a center for fishing, trade, and shipbuilding. Boston was the largest town in the British colonies until the mid-1700s. The Puritans' lasting contribution to colonial life was their belief in hard work and education. They opened the first public school, Boston Latin, in 1635. Harvard, the first colonial college, opened in 1636. Both still exist today. In the mid-1700s, trade and travel between colonial cities led to the first major roads. Boston Post Road was a system of roads connecting Boston and New York City. Once a path for Native Americans, it became a route to carry the post or mail. The road still exists today. Heavy trade made Boston's port a center of activity. People in Boston were among the first to fight for independence from Britain. The Boston Tea Party was an event at which several colonists dressed up as Native Americans and dumped tea into the harbor to protest a British tea tax. Many famous American patriots, such as Paul Revere and John Adams, lived in Boston. Charleston. First established in 1670 by British settlers, Charleston, South Carolina, was the fourth largest city in the American colonies by 1760. With about 11,000 people, Charleston was the wealthiest and largest city south of Philadelphia. Charleston served as a port for goods arriving from east and south of the colonies, especially those from the Caribbean islands and Bermuda. The climate around Charleston was ideal for plantation crops such as rice and indigo. A home to many different religions, the city had one of the largest populations of Jewish settlers in North America. Free blacks and slaves established churches in Charleston. It became known as the Holy City because of the number of church steeples that towered over the city. Charleston was a center of culture in the South as well. In fact, the first museum in the colonies opened there in 1773. As the American Revolution drew near, unhappiness with British rule grew with each new tax law. Like many colonists, Charleston's people were angry that they were taxed without anyone representing their interests in Britain. Life soon changed in the American colonies. People would continue to dress, eat, work, and live their lives. However, after the American Revolution, the colonists became citizens of the new United States of America. Why do airplanes fly? All about flight. By Rob Moore. Questions about flight. What makes flight possible? 4 forces make flight possible. 1 to lift you up, 1 to pull you down, 1 to push you forward, and 1 to hold you back. They are called lift, gravity, thrust, and drag. Thrust and lift are the forces that keep the object in the air. To make flight possible, they must be more powerful than their opposites, drag and gravity. Aircraft are carefully designed to give them enough lift and have powerful engines to create enough thrust to fly. Who flew the first aircraft? The Wright brothers flew the first successful flying machine in 1903. One engine attached to the frame turned propellers, and created enough power to keep the aircraft moving forward. This provided essential lift from air rushing under and over the wings to keep it airborne. How does a jet engine work? Jet engines work just like releasing an inflated balloon and having the escaping air propel the balloon in the opposite direction. First, they suck air in at the front with the fan. The air is then compressed and sprayed with fuel. An electric spark lights the mixture. The burning gases expand and blast out through a nozzle at the back of the engine. As the jets of gas shoot backward, the engine and the aircraft are thrust forward. How do aircraft wings work? An aircraft's wing area must be large enough to give enough lift for it to be able to fly. The shape of the aircraft's wings makes the air on top of the wings move faster than the air below them. The air below the wings is denser, so it pushes the wings from below, giving the aircraft lift. The faster an aircraft can travel, the less wing area is needed, so jet fighters often have smaller wings compared to those of cargo aircraft. How do gliders stay up in the air? Gliders have no thrust, so they must be towed or launched into the sky to give them momentum. Their long, slender wings give great lift, but they need thermals to sustain their flight. Thermals are patches of air that rise because they are warmer than the surrounding air. A glider needs to use the lift of this warmer air to gain height. Questions about bumblebees and kites. Why can a bumblebee fly? People used to believe that bumblebees should not be able to fly because their wings are too flat and small and their bodies are too round and heavy. However, the bumblebee uses its wings more like a helicopter than an airplane. They rotate their wings very quickly, at about 200 beats a second. A bumblebee flies forward by tipping its wings down at the front. This action turns lift into thrust. Why can kites fly? Kites fly using the force of lift. The kite is held by its line at an angle to the wind so that it is lifted rather than pushed. Lift works in an upward direction, opposing the pull of gravity on the kite. Some kites have a tail, which acts like an anchor and provides stability. The tail causes drag, which holds the bottom of the kite down and steady. If the line is released, the kite becomes a glider and gradually descends to Earth because it has no thrust. Questions about high flight. How does the space shuttle fly into space? The space shuttle takes off vertically, attached to rocket boosters. The external tank and boosters are cast off before the orbiter goes into orbit around Earth. After its mission, the orbiter returns to Earth unpowered, like a glider. Its wings are shaped so it can glide through Earth's atmosphere before landing on a runway. The Space Shuttle orbiter uses a parachute as a brake. How do rockets work? Rockets burn fuel to create a stream of hot gases that shoot out from the back of the rocket. The backward force of the gas jet gives the rocket thrust. The rocket's forward thrust propels the spacecraft into space. The faster the gases are propelled from the rocket and the more fuel that it is given, the faster the rocket will be forced to move forward and the greater the thrust. Rockets are the only engines powerful enough to overcome Earth's gravity and lift objects into space. It's a fact. Dirigibles. Dirigibles were used for passenger transport in the 1920s and 1930s. But after the disastrous explosion of the German Hindenburg in New Jersey in 1937, they lost favor with passengers. Airships. Simple airships were used for military observation as early as the 18th century. In World War II, airships were used as a guard against enemy aircraft. Cables were trailed beneath the floating airships, blocking the path of aircraft. 2-in-1. The Harrier jump jet can land and take off vertically like a helicopter, but flies like a jet. It has movable jet nozzles that can be changed to allow the aircraft to take off vertically but to fly horizontally. Jetset. The de Havilland Comet was the first jet aircraft to go into regular passenger service. It began flying in 1952. It could fly fast enough to halve the travel time for many long journeys. By 1958, jet airplanes were common for travel between Britain and North America. Heliflight. In 1907, the French inventor Paul Cornu was the first person to design and build a powered aircraft that flew vertically. The first flight was very short. The machine lifted its inventor about 1 foot, 0.33 meters, and the flight lasted about 20 seconds. The landing gear was made from 4 bicycle tires, which was very fitting as Cornu was a bicycle maker. Can you believe it? Kites. The Chinese first made and used kites. In 400 BCE, they used colorful kites in religious ceremonies and for military purposes. The kites were used to observe the enemy and for escaping from cities under siege. In recent years, kite flying has developed into a sport. Parachutes. Parachutes were first designed in Europe in the 15th century. Leonardo da Vinci sketched a design during the period 1480 to 1483, but some historians believe that parachutes were used in China as early as the 12th century. The first parachutes used silk as a material for the canopy and lines, but modern designs use artificial fibers such as Dacron, Spectra, or Kevlar because they are lighter, stronger, and do not stretch as much as silk. Amazing paragliding flight. In 2007, a German paraglider, Eva Wisniewska, was caught in a storm in New South Wales, Australia, and swept to an altitude of over 29,527 feet, 9,000 meters, higher than the peak of Mount Everest. At about 19,685 feet, 6,000 meters, ice formed on Wisniewska's sunglasses before she blacked out because of lack of oxygen. After 40 minutes, she regained consciousness and flew her paraglider back to Earth, landing safely. When rescuers found her, she was still covered in ice. Hang on. In 1922, Georges de Beautazat built a helicopter with 4 6-bladed rotors. It carried up to 3 passengers in more than 100 flights at McCook Field near Dayton, Ohio, USA. One of the passengers clung to the frame to show the machine's stability. However, the helicopter never rose higher than 16.4 feet, 5 meters. Who found out? Flight design, Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519, was born near Florence in Italy. He was a great artist and inventor who designed and sketched many machines that were centuries ahead of their time. Among his machines were a tank, a submarine, a parachute, and a flying machine. His flying machine was designed to be powered by a human passenger beating his arms like the wings of a bat. The design was based on Leonardo's careful study of the way the wings of birds and bats worked. First flight, Wilbur Wright and Orville Wright. The Wright brothers, Wilbur, 1867 to 1912, and Orville, 1871 to 1948, are credited with being the first people to make a heavier-than-air, controlled human flying machine. They experimented a great deal with gliders for a number of years, perfecting their propeller, engine, and steering designs. On December 17, 1903, at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, Orville flew their aircraft, the Wright Flyer, for 39 minutes at about 10 feet, 3 meters off the ground. It was a very short and low flight, but it was enough to encourage the brothers to develop their aircraft. They eventually built aircraft for the U.S. Army. Daredevil aviator, Elizabeth Bessie Coleman. Bessie Coleman, 1892 to 1926, was born in Waxahachie, Texas. When she was at the Colored Agricultural and Normal University in Langston, Oklahoma, she read about the Wright brothers and Harriet Quimby, a woman pilot. She dreamed of becoming a pilot too, but at that time a black woman was not able to take flying lessons in the United States. Bessie eventually learned to fly at the renowned Fédération Aéronautique Internationale in France. She received her pilot's license in 1921, becoming the first American to obtain her license from the French Aviation School, and the first licensed black pilot in the United States. In 1922, Bessie gave her first performance at an air show at Curtis Field near New York City. Tragically, she died in an aircraft accident in Jacksonville, Florida at the age of 34. Kevlar. Stephanie Kvolek. Stephanie Kvolek, born in 1923, is an American research scientist who invented the synthetic fiber Kevlar. Kevlar is 5 times stronger than steel, and so is extremely strong for its weight. It is used a great deal in aviation, especially for safety helmets, aircraft panels, and parachutes. Lightweight materials such as Kevlar are very important in aviation, as things must be made as light as possible. Kevlar is also used to make light and effective bulletproof vests.